Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have two amazing guests to introduce to you now. Brandon and Whitney Cawood are parents turned filmmakers who are currently embarking on a fascinating quest after discovering their child's sensitivity to synthetic dyes. Their journey into making a new documentary called To Die For, a documentary, delves into the profound impacts of these chemicals, featuring meetings with leading experts and heartfelt interviews with affected families. Through poignant stories and scientific evidence, they unveil the hidden perils of these synthetic dyes, igniting awareness of these toxic ingredients and their far reaching effects on individuals and families. After discovering their child's life altering sensitivity to synthetic dyes, parents and first time filmmakers, Brandon and Whitney Cawood, set out to uncover the impacts of these additives. Their journey to meet with the world's leading synthetic dye experts, conducting in person interviews with scientists, research, and impacted families. This exploration reveals a series of shocking stories and surprising discoveries. You can find Brandon and Whitney on their website at www.todieforthedocumentary.com and on social media on Instagram at todiefordocumentary. And die is spelled D-Y-E, not D-I-E. Brandon and Whitney Cawood, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you for having
Thank you
us.
for having
I'm glad to
us.
be here.
Such an honor to host both of you. You guys are doing really incredible work. I am so excited for this documentary to be coming out. You mentioned to me offline that you guys are the team. You guys have done all of this yourselves, doing all the marketing and social media. I just have to say, you guys have done a tremendous job so far. Your social media is amazing. The cover of the documentary looks so good, very, very striking. So kudos to you for doing such a good job with all
Thank
this.
you.
Thank you very much.
That's very kind to say.
And we are the team. And my background is in commercial photography and commercial video. So like this is our first endeavor in a feature length film. So we are first time filmmakers, but like it's what I do for a living is short form video. So I it's not a new like a new area, but
Yeah.
but yeah. So we did the poster, we did the entire film, we did it all ourselves. It's a 2-person team. It has been a journey.
Well, yeah, and like both of our backgrounds have kind of helped us. I'm a former teacher, so I feel like I'm pretty good at breaking down complicated content so that other people can understand it. I also, after I quit teaching, I did like freelance marketing, was the director of marketing for a nonprofit. So I do kind of feel like both of our gifts and experiences have kind of come together to help us get this information out there.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I am kind of like the opposite. Like I suck at brevity. Like making an Instagram reel for me is really hard for me to like reduce down. I'm an oversharer, so I make things really long and way too complicated. I'm not very good at keeping things short. Brandon, for you, what was it like to go the opposite way, to like be really good at short content to now make an entire documentary?
It was definitely a different experience. So, a lot of times and I like to kind of, if I'm working with a big client who has a very specific vision, they might have a script and have things scripted out and have it exactly how they want it to go. And I just kind of put that together. But a lot of times I have clients who trust me and they know that they know their strengths, they know my strengths. So I kind of like sometimes taking an idea and building something, you know, getting the footage, getting voiceover stuff and creating like a little 5-minute video for a company or something like that. And so that's typically how I do that. Once we started getting into all these interviews and we started having 2 hours of footage of each person in the documentary and we, all this stuff, all this information we wanted to cover, we had people talking about the same thing. Like I learned very quickly that we were going to have to get a lot more organized. So luckily Whitney is very good at organization. So she came in, we sat down, we had to watch all the interviews multiple times. She made a spreadsheet like, okay, we're talking about red 3 here. This person. So we had like a little spot for each specific little point that we were making. And honestly, when we started this, I had no idea how much work it was going to be. Like I thought we could get it done in about a year, maybe. So we're going on a year or 2.5 years, right?
Yeah, we just completed our second year.
So it's much more complex, and also the project kind of grew.
Evolved.
It evolved when we first started. We didn't know anybody in the scientific world. We had a couple of friends who we had mentioned die to, and they'd had a good experience. So we're like, maybe we'll just interview these people that we know. Maybe we'll meet a couple of people on the internet and kind of try to get a couple of scientists to say some stuff. And it just, God, slowly opened door after door. We met with one person that like, I know this person. And, we met with Lisa, who used to work for Center for Science and the Public Interest. And she really like exploded the door for us and got us in with all the researchers and even some of the family. So it's been a really cool experience. Looking at it now, I've enjoyed it. Looking at the beginning, if you would have told me how much work it would have been, I might have been like, I don't know about that.
Well, and he was a little bit reluctant at the beginning because the way we started our journey was, obviously or I guess your viewers may not know, but our son has a neurologic reaction to synthetic dyes. And so we had a few years where we were really struggling with just like not being able to keep his hands to himself and just being overstimulated and hurting friends and biting and hitting. And I should preface this by saying he's always been like a super sweet, kind, like good boy. Like he really has. And a lot of people that hear, okay, we're struggling with hitting and biting, like a lot of that can be normal, but it was happening like over and over and over and over. And so once we found out it was synthetic dyes, my head started really spinning because really the only place he was consuming synthetic dyes regularly was his medication. And like it's over the counter medication. This wasn't a prescription
Allergy
medication.
medicine.
It was allergy medicine. So he had chronic ear infection. So he was always on allergy medication. And so once we just basically took away the allergy medication, it's like, oh, the behavior stopped. He was out of his Rev 40 loop. And so like my brain was spinning and I went down like the Google rabbit hole trying to figure out like what's going on with synthetic dyes. And like I started to try to read the research, and my background is in education. So like even just reading the abstract was really confusing to me. So I really wanted to talk to researchers and ask them questions and try to figure out what was really going on. And so I asked Brandon to document our journey, and reluctantly, but thankfully he said yes.
Well, I mean,
Wow.
if your wife comes up to you and says, "Hey, I want to make a documentary," and at this point, like
Spend our own money.
at this point, I believe that dyes were a thing. In the very beginning, I was kind of reluctant that this was even possible, a part of what was going on with him. But so yeah, when your wife comes up to you and says like, we should make a documentary, that's gonna take a long time and a lot of work. We still work full-time jobs. I have a business that I run, and so
Just work part-time.
so at first I was a little hesitant. I was like, I don't know if we have time to do that. But she also started a Facebook group around the same time, figuring all this out, and like it just really started growing and growing and growing. Within 2 years, we reached 580,000 people in that group.
Wow. Yeah.
But even early on, we were seeing numbers that were crazy. Like in the first couple of months, we were in the tens of thousands of people that have joined this group. So we saw that there was a need and a desire for this information. And you know how like Facebook and social media is, if you're getting that number of people in your group, that's probably just a small percentage of the actual people who want that kind of information.
Well, that's really no credit to us either. I think what it is people are searching for answers. And so when they found a Facebook group, like just people started joining, and for whatever reason, Facebook favored us. God brought those people to us. And I mean, something similar has happened with our Facebook page as well, like our documentary film page. It has really blown up too. What are our numbers at right now? Almost 40,000.
We'll hit 40,000 this week.
Wow.
Yeah, which is crazy because like we haven't spent any money in all of our marketing. We've not spent any money on ad spend. It's all been organic. And I think that really has to do with people are just really eager to learn about this information. There's nothing else on the market. There's no other synthetic dye documentary. There's very little research, or I mean, there's tons of research, but there's very little information for the consumer. So aside from like TikTok videos, like people don't really feel like there's a super credible source, I guess, to take all this information that's very scientifically backed and then, get it out to the public. I don't know that really exists right now. So that's really what we're trying to do. In addition to our film, like our heart is to really break this information down and put it in bite-sized chunks so that the consumer can be able to change their life and to make swaps, synthetic dye swaps, and for their families to also be happy and find swaps that they love and not just, go on like a kale and sardine diet, which I mean, we're all about whole foods. Like we really are. This journey for us started off with, I mean, I've always looked at things. I've always wanted and we've always purchased mostly like organic foods, which is ironic that we're doing this and that our son was consuming synthetic dyes. But I've always kind of leaned toward that. But this has really been almost like a gateway drug to, oh my goodness, there's tons of chemicals, and we've become much more serious at looking at everything and not just what our children eat. So it's really opened up a lot of doors in that for us.
Oh, that's incredible. I just don't know many other fields that would drive people to go to the lengths that you guys are going to share this message. I mean, you see in this world of like nutrition where you're talking largely to an audience that has already found low carbohydrate or ketogenic or carnivore diets because they feel bamboozled, they've suffered, they've experienced all kinds of digestive issues or mental issues or whatever, and they've had to find alternate solutions and go on unconventional paths to try to find healing. And I don't see this same level of passion in many other areas like you guys are into, like to tell this story and to do it properly, taking 2.5 years to going to these lengths in your free time and not even as your primary job, in your free time, to tell the story and to see that response already. Like the documentary hasn't even come out yet, to get that response from the public. I think you're absolutely right. I think people are pissed that they're being lied to and they're trying to find other alternative solutions. So I think your work is amazing. It's so cool.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah, we definitely, and I can say for anybody out there that's working on like social media content, one thing that has helped us is that I am the key audience. Like in both our group and in our film page, it's 96% women from ages 24 to 44. So I'm 33, so I'm right there in that sweet spot. I am the consumer. And so like we're also going through this journey. So what I need as a consumer, I'm just making those resources for other people. So I do think that that helps. And then we also, like, we've spent 2 years serving our audience. Like we really genuinely want to help people. So like it's difficult sometimes because you're creating things and not getting anything back. But what we are getting is we're getting loyalty. We have an army of people that are willing to go to bat and make changes on the behalf of everyone in the United States about synthetic dyes. Like we have noticed that our audience, for whatever reason, they are really willing to get behind the things that we say. And I think that's because I think that they ultimately see that we are trying our best to, help people.
Well, it's been interesting too, because like, I don't know if it's because of our demographics or whatever, but Facebook, I would have thought that Instagram would have been initially probably where we would have had the most growth, but Facebook has been huge. Like our Instagram is growing, and it's growing, consistently.
We started that more recently too.
Yeah,
though.
but for whatever reason, Facebook, like if you're gonna join one or the other, join the Facebook group, and because there's it's pretty powerful.
No, please join our Instagram.
Yeah, and join our Instagram too, because we would like to get those numbers up. But I guess I think it's probably the shareability of Facebook. Like a lot of the stuff that we post, like Whitney does, die free list all the time, and those get shared thousands of times. And like she said, we're making content that's not necessarily always about the film. A lot of times it's just about
shareable,
like a lifestyle
and helpful information.
Yeah, so.
Well, it's a law of reciprocation, right? You guys are starting out by providing value to people and not asking anything of them. And so people are more willing to, contribute or help or share as much as possible. And you're right, like in the introduction, as I was trying to decide, like, what am I going to put in there to find you guys? I put in your Instagram because visually it's so cool. And I would have thought that would have been the bigger platform. So it's interesting that you mentioned Facebook. And yeah, I could see how that would be, more favorable for you guys as far as the shareability and where people can build a little bit more community and like talk amongst themselves. Is that kind of what you're noticing?
Yeah, that's what we're noticing. And like, I think the shareability is it, because we're creating content. We're not just creating content so it goes viral. We're genuinely trying to create content that's useful. And when people, especially women, come across content that they feel like is useful, they want to tell everybody. So people are just much more likely to press that share button. I think Instagram for video, I think Instagram is more favorable. So I do feel like once our film comes out and we start creating content that is in short little snippets, I do think that it'll like ramp up a little bit.
Yeah, so. we've wanted to kind of keep the film itself under wraps some. We will, once the film comes out, we'll start putting together little reels of little segments, things like that. And I think those will do well on Instagram and platforms like that, Instagram and TikTok. Cool. So we're excited about that.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I get annoyed by social media, but as I've said many times, it's where people are, and that's where you need to be if you need to get your message across. So I think that's wonderful. One thing that's really surprised me about learning about your journey and about your kids and everything that you've learned is that you landed on the dyes. Like I would have been a lot more suspect of other things. I think in the last few years, people at least have been made aware to some extent, probably not the masses, but some people that are looking for this information realize that there's a lot of crap in our foods and these dyes are not the best. But I find it interesting that it wasn't something that I would have suspected more than the dyes. It wasn't like sugar or wheat or any of those other things. Can you tell us a little bit more about that journey of like getting things out and learning that it was actually the dyes?
Yeah, well, okay, like I said, we were already a little bit, I guess I was probably a little bit. Have you ever heard the term scrunchy?
I have
Like,
not.
kind of, okay, so that's like kind of a new term. Like, I would say now I'm much more cautious about all things, but at that time, I was trying to have a balanced life where it's like mostly organic, but then, on the weekends, we, go a little ham, which I mean, we do still keep a balanced life. Like, but anyway, I say all that to say, like, we already, like, the foods that he ate, like, he didn't even eat. I was very careful to give him any sugars to begin with. Like, we started off with just vegetables so that he could, like, get a taste for vegetables. And now he's a very good eater. But anyway, we really weren't doing a whole lot of sugars and
Gotcha.
processed foods to begin with. So I think that's where we were just kind of like, okay, we don't do sugar. Like, we don't do, I mean, we did do some sugar, but we don't do a lot of sugar. It would just be like birthday parties. Of course, we wouldn't bring anything extra for birthday parties, whereas now we do have to bring like a dye-free swap. Um, but what I did was I searched foods that could impact behavior,
Well, and
and I came across.
the reason that you did that to begin with is your food allergies.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I should rewind. I have several food allergies, and I think that's likely a result of I spent about a year on antibiotics.
Oh,
And so my gut health, and then also I likely had a gene that was turned, I don't know. But anyway, I have several food allergies and they're big. So I'm allergic to wheat, dairy, yeast, eggs, and cashews. And so it's not an anaphylactic allergy, but it is a true allergy in that I went to an allergist and they tested me. It's not just a food sensitivity. And so like I have felt the power of eliminating foods that were creating harm and inflammation in my body and how much better I felt in my mind and everything. So I knew the power of food. And so I was searching foods that could impact behavior, expecting just to get or hoping just to get just a minor shift just to help us out a little bit. So I came across an article that suggested eliminating wheat, cow's milk, or dairy, wheat, dairy, and synthetic dyes. And so we did a complete elimination diet. And this was actually while we were on vacation. So we started on vacation, this elimination diet, and just reading labels. And within 48 hours, like our child was a different child. And
wow.
I guess to back up, before we did the elimination diet, he had bad days most days. Like he did a mother's morning out. So between like 9 and 11, 3 days a week, he was going to like daycare and we were getting several write ups. I was having to pick him up several times a week. I mean, it was tireless. And so we did the elimination diet. And we would occasionally, sorry, let me back up. Before we did the elimination diet, we would occasionally have days where he was just so good and so easy to reason with. And so like we weren't like super keen on giving him a diagnosis. So whenever we did the elimination diet, 48 hours, that child that we had on occasion that would just be really easy to reason with, we had that child for 30 days straight. Like
Wow.
he stopped hitting us. He might have hit us once that month. You could like reason with him when it was time to go or whenever we did something that was not what he wanted to do. It was like, okay, he could listen. And we started to make progress with his behavior like really quickly and quite literally within 48 hours. And so after the 30-day elimination diet, I reintroduced wheat and it had no effect. Then I reintroduced dairy and it had no effect. And when I reintroduced synthetic dyes within 15 minutes, the behaviors that we were seeing all those years, they came flooding back. The hitting, the inability to cope,
Fits.
the fits, it just all came flooding back. And so like we knew that it was synthetic dyes just based off that. And so that is our story. Not every kid reacts that dramatically. Um, for most kids, it's just like a small shift in behavior or it creates aggression or sleeplessness. Um, But for our child, it was dramatic. And for a lot of kids, it is really dramatic. And so we always suggest at least starting with dyes. And what we've seen with a lot of families is they will eliminate synthetic dyes, and then that will help them get to like the baseline of where their child is, where God created their child to be. And then they can figure out, okay, maybe they have like ADHD or something like that, or maybe they have a sensitivity to another food, and then they eliminate that. And so it was helpful for us to go through the complete elimination. And so that's what we suggest with families, is to completely eliminate it for 30 days, see the impact. If there is no behavioral impact, still feel really good about your eliminating something that's very toxic to us, something that can cause cancer, that can be genotoxic. So even though there may not be a behavioral issue, we always suggest like eliminating synthetic dyes either way.
Well, and also we saw, as the group grew, we saw that we thought originally that our story was going to be pretty rare. We thought Atreyu was probably a rare case, but then the more we heard, it's the more stories similar to ours, and kids having even worse reactions to dyes. And I think what really inspired Whitney to like really want to do this is the fact that you sit down and think about, okay, if we would not have figured this out, like what would the trajectory of his life have been? Like he was having trouble making friends. He was having trouble like with teachers. Like, it's a lot of times your kid can have problems in their daycare or their school, but when your kid is the behavior kid in the class, like it's dramatic, not only for them, it's dramatic for the family. And
Well, we even had one teacher, and this is painful. We had one teacher, and we've never said this on a podcast, that told us that, and our child is very smart, and everybody thinks their kid's smart, obviously. But she said in her 20 years of teaching, he is the smartest kid she's ever taught. But he is
Wow.
in the top 3 worst kids she's ever taught.
Oh my
She said
goodness.
that
this was at 3 years old.
at 3 years old. And she also said in that same meeting that he didn't have friends. And at this point, they were putting in a lot of manpower to try to help him. And I do understand that. But and it makes sense. You have a kid that keeps hurting you at school. You would tell your child to give them some space until they figure out how to be a good friend. We've had that conversation. And so at 3, I have a background in education. I kind of thought we were going to have to homeschool to keep him. And I mean, we have a lot of friends that do homeschool. It's a really great option. Luckily, we have a really great school that he goes to. It's a STEM school.
Mm.
I am so sorry. Alexa, stop. It's time for me to take out the laundry. I'm sorry. I'll back up. Luckily, we have a really great school system, and he goes to a great STEM school, so it's worked out for us. But at that point, we thought that we were going to have to homeschool to protect other kids and to help him. And so to go from that to our child has quite literally, so he's been in public pre-K, kindergarten, and in first grade. He's never hit a child. He's never had a fit. He's never been upset. His teachers say that he's exceptionally well behaved. I mean, he's a boy. He's a silly boy.
Just made it into the gifted program.
Yeah, he's in the gifted program.
Wow.
He's in a language immersion program. I mean, so like our story, it kind of feels unbelievable that we had a child that was hitting every single day, that was kicked out of daycare, that like did all the things, and then to flip to, oh, he's like a perfect child, which he's not perfect, but like he is what you would want a child to be, and so like it sounds crazy. So for a long time, I didn't really want to share a story because it sounds crazy. And like if you were to tell me this story, previous me would say, yeah, I bet it was developmentally, like he just kind of grew out. And no, it was the next 2 days we saw this shift. So it's wild. And so we now know that there are a lot of chemicals that can affect our brain. And this was just the chemical that was really, really impacting him. And so for a lot of kids, it can make a really, really big difference. And so our film is, we have interviewed world's leading synthetic dye experts in the UK, in the US, but we also, I think the hard hitters in our film are really the families. We have interviewed families, so it's like half science and half stories. And we have stories where like their 7-year-old was suicidal and literally wanted to get a knife to kill themselves. And like, this was something that happened often. And, when they eliminated dyes, his brain was able to slow down and he was able to function. And now their son is in college. He went from 8th grade to college English, 1101 or whatever it is. And he has a success story similar to Atreyu. And we have families that, their child was looking at a bipolar diagnosis. And, she was too young to be diagnosed, but doctors were like, yeah, this is what your life is going to be like. Medication is going to be the only thing that's going to help your child. And then you eliminate synthetic dyes and they finally have their real child. And that's what really gets me is, we have these children and the things that they're consuming are making them something that they're not. And so that's the most painful part to me is these kids are suffering. They're suffering with their families. They're suffering. Their families are suffering. Their marriages are suffering. But this kid has no friends. This kid feels like their life is done at 7. And so that's so painful. And I mean, those are obviously extreme stories, but you could also make the argument that a child that, already has hyperactivity and, they already have a lot of issues. And then you couple that with a dye sensitivity and you're just sending them over the edge with the aggression and the inability to focus. And like, that's not how they were created. Something they're eating is causing these issues. And so that was painful for us. And so our child has figured it out. Our life is pretty easy. He's good at reading labels. Like we bring swaps to school and birthday parties, which that does take work, but it's really not that hard. But what really pained us is that there are kids that are suffering now that, are never going to figure it out unless there is some kind of legislation change or unless these dyes are out of their food because, not every family has access and the money to buy the fancy swaps, to go to Trader Joe's, to drive 20 minutes to Whole Foods. And not every family has the time to do that. Like I said, I work part-time, so I have the ability to do all the things for my kid. You're a single mom, you might not have that. If English is your second language, you might not have that. If you're in poverty, you probably can't afford the more expensive swaps and they might not be covered under food stamps. So being a teacher that taught in an inner city school, it was important to me that those kids matter as much as my kid matters. And so it's not fair to me to be in my bubble and say, okay, my kid's good. What about these kids? What about the kids that I taught that have never even slept on a mattress? What about the kids that I taught that their family, their mother and father are both illiterate? Like, do they matter? They do matter. Obviously, they matter to us. So that's why we're so passionate about getting these chemicals out of our food for all kids.
Well, and also when you start to look at synthetic dyes, a lot of other additives serve a purpose. They're preservative or they're flavor enhancing or, they serve a different purpose. But literally like artificial food colors, synthetic dyes serve no other purpose other than to color your food. It's literally a cosmetic addition to food. So there's not really a big argument for the need for it other than to use it for marketing. And when you see it affecting kids like this, even if it's a small percentage, even if it's a 1 to 2% of the population are being affected, I mean, we don't know those numbers. Those numbers could be
That's hypothetical.
Yeah, hypothetical.
Sure.
Even if it's like 1 or 2%, that's still millions of kids being affected by something that's not needed and serves no nutritional purpose. So
Well, and dyes are also used to make unhealthy foods look more appealing. So if you use an artificial flavor to flavor your protein shake, it's not colored. So you use a synthetic dye to make it look like it's really strawberries whenever you use the strawberry flavor. So, I mean, the spirals just keep going on and on and on. And like, it's really not needed, obviously. And it's oftentimes used to market kids' foods. And so by market, we mean to make the foods look more appealing so that people want to buy it. So like whenever you're watching like these sugary cereal commercials, like they're bright and beautiful. And like we love colors, but kids also love colors. So they're used to enhance the food so that kids and adults will want to buy it. But to me, what is one of the most painful places that I see synthetic dyes is in medication. Because I mean, we luckily don't have to take medication daily. No one in our family does. But I had a mom that reached out to us. Her child is epileptic And if you know anything about epilepsy, if you continue to let epilepsy happen, if you continue to have a child that continues to have seizures, it takes away a part of your brain, or it impacts a part of your brain every single time. There's brain damage. And so you can't just not take epilepsy medication. And so the two medications that were available for her daughter, one of them had Rev 40. This child has an allergic reaction to Rev 40. And so she had to switch to the one that has Red 3. And so Red 3 is particularly damning in that we know since 1990 it has caused cancer in animals.
We've known since the 80s that it causes cancer, but in 1990 the FDA banned it in cosmetics and externally applied drugs.
You can go to the FDA website and you can see where the FDA has said, yes, we know that Red 3 causes cancer in animals. And so this child is taking Red 3 every single day.
But they didn't take it out of food in 1990 because it had already been permanently approved. So there's a bunch of weird red tape things that they said they couldn't take it out just based on the cosmetics petition. So for 2024, 34 years now, the FDA has been saying they're going to take steps to remove Red 3 from food and ingested drugs, and they haven't done it.
They're still there.
So much so that last year, California just decided to ban it and 3 other chemicals on their own. So,
well, and up until last year, Red 3 was in Pediasure, the chocolate and the strawberry. So you have a child,
up until
which
this
both
year.
of our children, up until this year, both of our children were little. I'm little. I'm a little person. I'm going to have little babies. And doctors were encouraging us, you need to try to give them like something like Pediasure. Luckily, I made my own smoothies at home, like protein smoothies at home to give them. But suggesting Pediasure that has Red 3 to someone with a developing brain with for a 2 and 3 year old, that's just crazy. It's crazy that that is legal to have something that we know causes cancer in animals, and then we're allowing it in children's products and medication.
Which, if you look into it, it kind of seems like it's not legal because there's the Delaney clause, which is part of the food additive amendment, states that the FDA is not supposed to allow anything in food that is known to cause cancer,
which is also on their website.
If it's known to cause cancer in people or in humans or animals. So they literally banned it from cosmetics because it caused cancer when they fed it to rats. It caused tumors. But they didn't take it out of food. And it hadn't been permanently approved in cosmetics yet. That's why they were able to ban it in cosmetics, but it had already been permanently approved in food. And if you look back at the history of the FDA, there's a big history of that they've approved something, and it takes moving mountains for them to reevaluate it and to finally say, okay, you're right, this probably shouldn't. It's crazy. But Red 3, that's the one that's so mind-boggling, because you have this area that you don't ingest it, that it's banned in because you fed it to animals, but then the area where you're allowed to ingest it is still allowed. So it's nuts. So
the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, the F in the FDA is supposed to be for food. And so ironically, they have boards that
advisory
boards that they consult. As of right now, as of the most current information we know, there are no food advisory boards. There was one, which Lisa, somebody that we interviewed in our documentary, she was on it, and they disbanded it. They're all drug. There are hundreds of drug boards, but there's no food boards, which is crazy. So they're looking more at the drugs than the food, which is not their job.
And I think the FDA has openly admitted that they don't have the capacity to dig into it. And they literally had a public meeting last week where they're saying they're going to take steps to look into reevaluating things that have been approved, but it's still very vague, and it's still kind of, I mean, hopeful. I mean, it's a step in the right direction, and I think that maybe the food advisory boards is something that they talked about potential for. But like she said, there's tons of drug advisory boards, and then they had the one in 2011, and I think that got kicked off because of with the EU having the warning label on dyes and stuff like that. It got brought up, and they brought in this advisory board, and they asked a very, very pointed question to that advisory board of, can we say without a shadow of a doubt that synthetic dyes are showing a causal, reaction to children? And at the time, the studies at the time it's just the way they worded it. Lisa told us like they were trying to like get them to kind of reword the question so they could kind of give some clarity to why they were answering that way, but they wanted them to answer that specific question. And then if you go back and look at articles and stuff that came out after that advisory board, you know, it says like our panel of experts say that there's no link to or no like causal. It's
Yeah,
crazy. But
right.
she said now, because there's been a lot more studies, and then the OEHA report came out in 2021 where the California OEHA office did like this big study where they brought in all the studies. It was
Most
like
comprehensive and rigorous study in the world to date.
so it basically took all the studies and combined and contrast all the evidence and basically came out with this big report that shows clearly that there's a causal effect. So she said if that advisory board existed today and they asked that exact same question, that they could say yes without a shadow of a doubt. So
wow.
It's crazy.
Look, I'm not holding my breath for the FDA to go changing their ways at this point. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not gonna wait on that one. And just I can't let this one slip. Just to reiterate for anybody who heard your child's name and is our age, can you tell us where you got the names from for your kids?
Our son's name is Atreyu, and so that's from The Neverending Story. I was a big fan of that movie growing up. I'm an 80s baby, and then I have mine. I go by Brandon, but my first name is Adam, so my initials are ABC. So we wanted our kids to have ABC initials. So he's Atreyu Brandon, and then our daughter, we're real big friends of Narnia, and so Aslan is the main lion, the lion in Narnia, but we made it like a girl version, so she's Aslan.
It's cool.
So.
I couldn't let that one slip away. I love that. Okay, so we're hearing about these dyes and we're hearing about the damage. I was going to ask you about studies that have been done. So there have been studies, there are meta-analyses like you're describing. How ubiquitous are these dyes? Is this like a few products in the grocery store we need to be aware of? Is it everything on the shelf? Like how many products are these things making into?
I mean, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of products. The thing is, like, even if you know that you need to avoid synthetic dyes, like it's hard to avoid them. Like I find myself, a lot of times like almost grabbing something and then be like, let me look at the label real quick, and it's got dyes in it. So I mean, it's heavily in processed foods, potato chips, candies, beverages. But then it's also in a lot of places that you wouldn't think about. There's brown foods, marshmallows, like the name brand marshmallows a lot of times have blue one in them. And then whenever we first started this journey, it's changed some now because we're able to find some now, but when we first started this journey, it was hard to find chocolate cake icing, vanilla cake icing, like things that are white and brown that shouldn't have any color, that didn't have dye in them. There is some I want to say that we've found some vanilla icing or something like that has not just blue, but has like yellow 5 in it, or
And a red 40.
red 40 in it. Yeah.
So
Like
random. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
I do know that
honestly, in our documentary, we have a segment where we're getting our friends and family to kind of look at dyed foods versus like non-dyed foods, and like the marshmallows, they couldn't tell a difference. So it's like I don't really know why it's there. And then also with Doritos, we have a segment where we're looking at the name brand Doritos versus an Aldi brand Dorito, and they look exactly the same. And so it's like this is kind of pointless, honestly. I think what's likely happening is they're using, I can only assume that maybe they're using a natural flavor instead of a real food or a real seasoning like paprika or something to color it. But yeah, it's really kind of permeated a lot of foods that you wouldn't expect. I mean, you know that the colorful ice cream and the colorful cereals likely have it, but there's also a lot of colorful foods that don't have dyes, like
and colorful food that should be colorful, like pickles. There's some pickle brands that pickles are normally greenish yellow, anyways. For whatever reason, they put yellow 5 in the pickle juice. So it's in a lot of stuff, and like a lot of times it's like sometimes it's things like there's a blueberry muffin pack that we bought just for the film to like we actually baked the muffin so we could do a B-roll shot of it. But like the little blueberries, I guess aren't real blueberries, so they have like dye.
what are they?
So it's I don't know. It's crazy. And I think a lot of times you'll see it in white foods. I think what's happening is blue dye kind of counteracts yellow. You've seen that purple toothpaste that you can brush on your teeth and it makes your teeth look really white. It's kind of the same idea. And I think the idea behind putting dye in products like that is to keep products consistently the same.
So we interviewed Cara Lynn from Just Ingredients, and that's something that she said, like all of her foods are whole foods, real foods. Like I use the example of a protein shake, but she said it's difficult to get the consistency to be exactly the same with each batch because each batch of strawberries are slightly different. And so for consistency, that is a challenge. But it's really kind of permeated a lot of foods that you wouldn't expect too, like fruit cups. If it has cherries in it, I'd definitely be turning it over because oftentimes maraschino cherries are soaked in red 40.
It used to be
Oh
red
my
3, but
goodness.
now they've shifted to red 40, but it used to be red 3.
Cinnamon rolls, obviously like baked goods, berry products, movie theater popcorn. That's painful.
Wow.
Heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking.
Cosmetics, toothpaste, hand soaps, and we avoid all those things because I mean, there aren't any formal studies that I know of about dyes soaking into your skin, but we know that products soak into your skin.
Yeah.
And so, like, we've seen our son react to like a temporary tattoo or paint being on its hands. So it really has permeated a lot of foods, but I'd say all that to say, like, if you are still not wanting to give up some of the sweet treats and the sugary things, like there are companies that are making really beautiful, vibrant, colorful foods that you would expect to have dyes. Like for example, Panera Bread, their cookies, even the M&M type cookies, the icing cookies, they're completely dye free. Dunkin' Donuts, aside from like their holiday one and some specialty ones, all of their regular, even sprinkle donuts are completely dye free. Baskin Robbins, same thing. They remove synthetic dyes out of their ice creams, even though they're
Oh,
brightly colored. So the argument that these companies can't do it does not exist. And the argument that it's going to put them out of business does not exist. This is just the reality is, yeah, their profits are going to go down because they're going to have to go from using a byproduct of petroleum to real foods that cost money. And so, yeah, your profit is going to go down, but the reality is you're not going to be bankrupt. Like, let's have some real foods here.
Well, and I think what's happened is processed food companies and the drink companies and stuff like that, they have normalized, especially in America, they have normalized these bright, bright colors. And so anytime a big company like that tries to make any kind of change, we're so programmed that this is the way these foods and stuff are supposed to
Also,
look
I would
like.
argue that, I mean, look at Panera, Baskin Robbins, and Dunkin' Donuts. No one has noticed that they're using turmeric, beet juice. Like and it's so bright. They have figured it out. I haven't figured it out in my baking world. I've not figured out how to keep my colors as bright after I bake them, but they have figured it out. So like it does exist. These billion-dollar companies, like you can figure it out like other companies have.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of pushback sometimes from the public if a company does. I mean, there's a in our documentary, and we haven't
People
talked
like
about
that.
we haven't talked about this in a lot of podcasts, so this will be unique to yours right now. But so in 2015, around that time, there was actually a couple of big companies that made commitments to take out dyes. I think Kellogg's did, and Food Babe. She talks a lot about that. That's kind of a mission that she's on right now, getting Kellogg's to get rid of dyes. General Mills made a commitment to take out dyes. Mars Candy made a commitment. But what's interesting is
Mars candy is like M&Ms.
yeah. So General Mills actually, they made the commitment to take dyes out of their entire portfolio. I think they were going to take out dyes, artificial colors, and artificial flavors. So they started out with 2 cereals. I can't remember what the second one was, but the big one and the one that's made the headlines and stuff like that, they actually did take dyes out of Trix.
It's called the
wow.
Trix fiasco.
So in 2015, General Mills removed dyes from Trix. And I think at first that, they poised it as this is going to be
They made a big public
a
announcement.
healthier option. So like for people who want to be healthy, this will be a healthier option without the synthetic dyes. So I think at first, because they kind of pinned it as like a healthier option, I think they saw sales go up a little bit. But then the internet got hold of it, and like people were so mad talking about how
You ruined my
they're
childhood.
ruining my childhood. Like
My
why?
kids' childhood.
And it was like a 1-2 punch because they had already went from the fruity shapes to the little dog food looking balls. And then they took the colors
And
out.
all this comparison with their food with dog food. Like it was
So, like,
it was a mess.
oh my
People were livid.
So like the internet lost their minds. And so they decided, you know what, let's just put dyes back in. And they actually there's a box that you can find on the internet. I tried to find one on eBay because I was going to use it in the documentary, but there's a box where they actually say they're back, talking about how the bright colors are back.
Good.
And we look at that and we're like, that's crazy. Like, Why do people not want to be healthier? And I think what it is, if the government and the FDA is telling you these chemicals are safe, we find no issue with them, like they're safe to consume, companies can use them, there's no regulation for them not using them, then why would the general public want those things out of their food? They, you know, like I said, we're programmed to enjoy and to prefer these bright colors. But I think the problem is there wasn't any kind of education about the potential harms of the dyes. And I don't think any of these companies are ever going to
There's
say,
a lawsuit waiting to happen. Hey, these chemicals that we have been giving you, we now know after 27 clinical trials that they can cause hyperactivity, sleeplessness, restlessness, irritability, and aggression in your children.
Right.
Oh, by the way, some of them are carcinogenic. Oh, by the way, some of them can be genotoxic. Oh, by the way, some of them can cause colitis. Sorry, our bad. We're taking them out. Like it would be lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. Like, I mean, it's obvious. No marketer would ever be like, "Oh, we were being bad. Now we're going to be good.
yeah,
Enjoy your
I
food."
don't think any company wants to admit we've been poisoning you for the last
Yeah.
3 decades, 4 decades, 5, whatever, you know? So,
Yeah.
so it's interesting. And so like in our film, our call to action is obviously we do need to write these companies. We do need to make our, you know, we need to vote with our dollars. We need to let companies know that we're not happy with these chemicals. But first, you know, we're wanting to spread that public awareness. And we are starting to see like a pendulum start to swing. You know, we're seeing people become more aware of this. We're seeing big influencers like Food Babe and you know, like the
Marlin and just
Harley and
ingredients.
Just Ingredients, Alex Clark that's talking about food dyes. A lot of big people are talking about food dyes.
Casey Ruff.
So it's kind
That's
of
the
there you go.
big one.
So
It is.
so you're seeing this shift, and so people are becoming more aware. And honestly, like I think our film, like we feel like in our brains we're like, okay, this film is taking a long time for us to get out, but I feel like the stage is being set perfectly. Like we are in a perfect time for this information to get out there. I feel like our film is going to reach people in a unique way. You know, we've got people's stories, we've got, you know, kind of a personal connection. So and we're at a really cool and critical time. And our like I said, our call to action is to write companies. That's important, but also we need to make legislative change. We need, you know, we're seeing that California is doing it. California is banning these chemicals on their own. So like if the FDA is not going to step up and do it, then I guess it's going to have to happen at a state level. Because like I just said, we can get these companies to take these dyes out. Like you can petition and that has worked and that hopefully that's a big part of the step and a big shift. But as you can see, they can always put it back in.
Or create new products with dyes.
So like it's kind of a process. We need to be writing these companies, we need to be writing our politicians, we need to be writing our school boards.
Well, and then also telling your story, like you're using your platform to help educate your audience about synthetic dyes. I mean, everybody has a platform, everybody has a scope of influence, whether you're a podcast host or you're a PTA mom or like wherever you're at, tell your story and start making influence because we really can see a change and we're starting to see a change in our community and starting to see a change in awareness, like you said. So I mean, people are talking about it. And I think, you know, once people know that there are risks associated with these synthetic dyes, I don't think they're going to be as appealing. So I think we all have a part to play.
And
Yeah.
a lot of times we say that we look at MAD, Moms Against Drunk Driving, very inspiring, a group of just regular moms that made a huge impact in like drunk driving legislation. So we feel like we've got, I mean,
Like regular people
I'm not,
can make big change.
I'm not I'm not a mom, so I'm not really part of our core audience, but like it's been really cool to be on the sidelines and see this.
The point is that regular people can make change.
Yeah.
And like you don't have to make this your full-time job. You just have to make an active and concerted effort.
And if you are a guy out there and you're listening to this, join the group because there are guys in the group. And I always like, it's like, you know, I always get to give like a digital high five to the guys that are in our group and talking about this stuff. So,
Funny.
you know, a lot of times the moms bring the dads in on this stuff, but you know, it's affecting everybody and it affects everybody at some level. So it's important for us all.
Well, a few things really stand out to me. First of all, is your passion. Obviously, going through all this work to share the story, it's just so important. I absolutely love the passion you guys are bringing to the table, and I love the mix of, interviewing the experts and the researchers and scientists, but also telling the stories and getting that out there. I think it's so inspirational. I love your optimism. For as hopeful as I am about some things, I get really pessimistic from time to time that things are not changing as quickly as I like. But like you said, if that pendulum is shifting and we're moving to more awareness, I think that's absolutely wonderful. I love your work. I'm so excited to check this movie out when it comes out. So Brandon and Whitney Cawood, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
So we've got a special spot on our website that way we can kind of keep up with people who've heard of us on a podcast. If you go to dieforthedocumentary.com/podcast, we have like a little email sign up list, and you'll get put into a list of people that found us through podcasts, which is kind of cool. That way we can communicate with you in like specific ways. But that's really the best way to kind of keep up with what's going on, because we have Whitney does like a newsletter once or twice a month, and then of course join the group. To really, really keep up, join the Facebook group for the film page. So that
Instagram.
And join the Instagram.
Yeah, but getting on the mailing list, like I really try to get our resources in one place and to try to make it as helpful as we can. So once you subscribe, I will give you a list of synthetic dyes so that if you're wanting to go dye free, I'll provide the list for you. I also have a list of places, unexpected products you'll find synthetic dyes, of which we named many of them now. Also synthetic dye free brands and resources. So like we're really trying to help as much as we can to go ahead and get families that first step so they can get started. And then also we've created a place on our website, and then I'll also be sending it out in our email list of email templates that you can write your school board, that you can write your senators, state representatives. Cool. And so like wherever you are on this journey, whether you're already dye free and you're ready to make change, or whether you're ready to just jump right in, we're going to try to give you the resources to help you.
I love that. Done. I'm signing up right now. That sounds amazing. So cool.
And you said this podcast is about a month out, right? So
yeah,
so I can go ahead and say, yeah. So the film's going to be out in January.
Awesome.
And so get excited about that.
Very much that. Awesome.
We're going to be working on like impact campaigns. So we'll be doing like private screenings and things like that over the next few months, and getting prepped and ready for that January release. So we're excited.
That's so awesome. How exciting for you guys. I know it's been a ton of work, but like I said, we're very much looking forward to this and getting this message out to more people. Again, you guys are just offering so much value for people and providing a lot of really great content. So grateful for both of you, Brandon and Whitney. Thank you very, very much for everything that you do. Thank you for all the hard work behind the scenes that I don't get to see. And also thank you for taking time out of your very busy lives to be on our show today. We really appreciate you both.
We appreciate you.
Thank you for having us. It was fun.
You guys are the
best.
Love your podcast. Thank you so much. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.